I'm Mike O'Neill, and I want to welcome you to Bench Builder's very first webinar. We are, in our time together, trying to come together and see how can we learn from each other. And so we set up this webinar with the idea that we want to be most helpful to those folks who we work most closely with. In large part, our clients fall into kind of two categories. We work most closely with business owners, and we work with HR professionals. And in most organizations, we work with both groups. But with that in mind, we wanted to kind of create a forum by which business owners and HR pros could come together, and we can together figure out how in the world are we going to deal with this COVID crisis. It's something that we knew was coming, but boy, oh boy, it has hit, and it's hit hard. If you were to look at the number of people who are on this call, the majority of you appear to be coming from an HR background. So for that reason, we're going to probably focus most of our time addressing HR related questions, since that seems to be reflective of most of the people who are on this webinar. So we're glad you are with us. We've set aside an hour. We're going to use this time hopefully most constructively. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Rhonda, and let her tell you a little more about herself.
Good morning. Thanks for joining, everybody. I'm Rhonda Beard, and I've been with Bench Builders for just about a year. Prior to that, I've been in human resources for 25 years, primarily in manufacturing, as well as banking and logistics. So for those HR people that are on the phone, I definitely feel your pain. I know a lot of the challenges that you're dealing with, and that's what we're hoping we may be able to help you with today. So we're really excited to be able to just chat with you today and hopefully get some of your questions answered.
Hey, thanks, Rhonda. In many respects, we kind of like to call this a chat. And if you can imagine, you've got a cup of coffee right here. The only difference is you got to kind of type in your questions, so don't spill your coffee while you're typing. Again, thank you for the questions that are coming in. These are excellent questions. Some of you have already submitted some questions to us, and here are the types of things that we may get to today, but we're going to give priority to the questions that have been submitted this morning. But what we're acknowledging is that we are all dealing with something that, well, how can you really prepare for it? One of the things we keep hearing from our clients is, you know, we have allowed some of our employees to work remotely. My goodness, what if all of our employees need to work remotely? Or better yet, what if some are working remotely and some are working in the regular place, doing what they regularly do? It opens a whole set of things. And so the assumption is that there are a lot of questions that center around communication. And we would like to spend just a moment this morning just kind of setting the stage of communication. That topic is probably the thing that we hear constantly as being most problematic. It doesn't matter if it's a large organization, a small organization, if it's a government entity. Even in the best of times, communication suffers. What about a crisis like we're dealing with right now? What should we be doing as leaders? And so we've kind of gone back and been looking into what the experts say. And what I would share with you, and most of you probably have already begun doing that, but communication really needs to be mindful of that you need to have one voice if all possible. And I suspect most of you have already done so, but we're encouraging, if you do not, create a team. For large organizations, this may be 4 or 5 people. For small organizations, it may just be 2. The team may even operate virtually, but you want to be in a position that when information is coming out from your company, be it to your employees, to your customers, to your communities, is that you're speaking kind of with one voice, and that you do so on a regular basis. You can't communicate too much. And in times like this, nobody has the answers. So be transparent in doing so. What we're finding is many of you on this call come from kind of an HR perspective, but even our business owners are saying, well, how in the world are we supposed to keep our employees informed? the same rules apply to regardless of who the audience is, but from employees, they're looking for good information, timely, and to do so on a regular basis. And you can use whatever means possible to kind of keep them informed. It should not be limited to just email. But if you have a company intranet, great. We've been recently introduced to Slack. And if you're not familiar with Slack, it's a wonderful tool to communicate almost in real time, almost like instant messaging. So if you're not familiar with Slack, we would encourage you to check that out. We have folks on this call who are mindful that we've got customers out there. How in the world do we keep up with them? It's not as easy to talk to our customers and reach out to them as it is with our employees. Well, if you are, we're encouraging you, you have to be intentional and be mindful of, you want to interact with your customers the best you can, focus on what's most important to them. They too are struggling, and they need to know that you hear them and you are responding to them. And that if there are things you can do to signal that you are there for them, we're encouraging you to do that. If there are things that you can do to kind of say, you know what, normally we would charge for X. Maybe this is the best time to not charge for X, just to show the goodwill that their relationship to you is very, very important. There's a temptation at times like this to go into sales mode. And our encouragement is this is a time for us to be together for each person. This is a time to really try to walk in their shoes, walk in the customer's shoes, walk in the employee's shoes, understand what they're dealing with, and to try to keep them informed as often as possible. You know, we've also got shareholders out there. They own stock, or we have actual owners of our businesses, and they need to be kept informed from a communication standpoint. And it serves no purpose to hide anything from them. We're encouraging you, be transparent with your shareholders and owners, and use this opportunity to reinforce, we've got this, we're going to work through this, we're going to come out stronger on the other end, and let them know what in fact you are doing. So we've kind of mentioned the employees, we've mentioned customers, we've mentioned your shareholders and owners. There's one other category that we tend to overlook, and that is the communities in which we're operating on. We've got some folks on this call who come from the government sector. These communities are looking for their employers to be leaders, and the way you show that is you be proactive with your communities. If you're not already, consider providing resources that can be helpful to those in need. It could be cleaning supplies, it could be setting up teams that go help in the community, anything you can do to signal to the community that we are still there for you. I don't know about you, but I've gotten a little bit hesitant to turn on the TV and watch the news because the media tends to ramp up these things and build anxiety. So our encouragement to you is, if you've got local media, keep them in the loop. And in the same way you're being transparent with your employees and with your customers and with your shareholders and owners, we're encouraging you to be as transparent with the media as you possibly can. So communication, it's a huge issue under the best of circumstances. It's even bigger now that we're dealing with this crisis. So Rhonda, I want to turn to you. We've got a number of questions coming in. Do you want to go ahead and begin fielding some of those, please?
Sure, and let me just preface by saying that, a lot of the new regulations and guidance on some of the leave benefits that I know people have questions on, they're still not finalized. So there may be some things we don't have answers on. If we don't, we will definitely look to find those answers and follow up and get those out to you later. So there's still daily updates from the government and from legal staff with more information coming all the time. So I think we have some pretty good information, but we may not have all of the answers, as a lot of people don't yet. But the first one is, we have a part-time employee that's also employed as an EMT. We've asked him not to come to work. Do we have to pay him, and if so, how much? Part-time employees do not need to be paid unless they work. So as an employer, If you choose to supplement and pay them a portion of their pay or pay them for a period of time, you can do that if you choose to, but you're not required to. And the paid sick leave that we'll also get into does not require you to pay people unless they qualify for one of the reasons under the Paid Sick Leave Act, which just asking an employee to not come to work is not going to be a reason that they would be eligible for paid sick leave unless they're experiencing symptoms of the coronavirus. So you're not required to pay a part-time employee who's not coming to work unless it qualifies under the paid sick leave reasons. Okay. Next one is we have 2 employees tested and out for 2 weeks. No results yet. Will we have to pay them if they're out prior to 4/1/20? So again, if they qualify under the paid sick leave, meaning that they've been taken out of work by a doctor because they're exhibiting symptoms, they would be eligible for the paid sick leave. However, this is one of those I'm not sure about prior to 4/1, because the effective date of the FFCRA, the family's first expanded leave, is 4/1. So that's one of those, because we have this huge window of time prior to 4/1 that I know all of you are dealing with and don't have answers yet. What happens with people out prior to that? So that's something I'll definitely follow up on and find out if you're going to be required. My first initial reaction would be no, because it's not effective until 4/1. So it may be that they use other paid time, that if they have paid time available prior to that. And certainly if they've been taken out of work by their doctor, it's going to be excused time. As far as paying them, I don't think the paid leave is going to be available until 4/1, but that's something we'll definitely follow up on. Okay, can a person draw unemployment as well as pay under ESLPA and EFMLEA at the same time? So if you're still employed, the only way that you can draw unemployment is if you've been laid off. So if an employee is out due to a reason that qualifies under the new Leave Act and they're getting paid, no, they can't collect unemployment at the same time. They may, if they're out for an extended period of time, for instance, let's give an example that you've decided to go ahead and cut your staff for 30 days or close your business for 30 days. And it's a temporary layoff situation. If they've been diagnosed or have symptoms or are qualifying under the paid sick leave to be out and be paid that 80 hours, and I probably should go ahead and go through that in just a second so everybody knows the parameters of that leave. They could be eligible for the 80 hours of paid sick leave, and when that's gone, if they're still laid off, then unemployment benefits would start, but they can't be paid unemployment and sick benefits at the same time. So let me go ahead and just quickly, since a lot of the questions are related to this, go through the very basics of the new extended family leave and paid leave. So there's 2 main elements of the FFCRA related to employers and employees. There's a lot in the Stimulus Act that is going to affect companies and individuals, and what we've mainly tried to focus on today that I think is of the most concern is the extended family leave and the paid sick leave. So let me just spend a minute to go through that, and then some of the questions that we're answering related to that probably fall in line a little better. So the effective date is 4/2 and it's through 12/31/20, and it is for employers with under 500 employees. So this is not a benefit that's going to be available to large companies. This is to help smaller companies with some of the financial difficulties that they're going to be having through a lot of the shutdowns and requirements that states and local areas are having on businesses. So it's for under 500 employees, and that's not just full-time employees, that's all employees counted in that 500. So the expanded family leave is only available for employees who can't work due to their minor child's school or childcare being closed due to COVID. So that's the only reason for the expanded family leave, is related to your children being at home because their childcare or school is closed. And that expanded family leave is available for up to 12 weeks. The first 10 days are unpaid, and then the following 10 weeks are at 2/3 of the employee's normal wage, with a maximum of $200 a day or $10,000 total for the leave time. So again, only for a child being out of school or out of daycare does an employee become eligible for that. And someone did submitted a question earlier as well. If an employee has already used their FMLA bucket for the year, are they going to be eligible for this expanded FMLA? And that's another one that hasn't been stated certainly, but I'm pretty certain that they are, because the expanded FMLA is available to any employee that has 30 days of employment. So they don't have to meet the normal 12 months and 1,250 hours under the regular FMLA. So I'm quite certain that the expanded FMLA is going to be available whether you've used any other FMLA during the year or not. And then real quickly, the paid sick leave is a separate bucket, and the paid sick leave is 80 hours of pay available to employees if they're unable to work due to COVID. And the reasons are pretty specific for that, and I'll go through them real quickly. So either the employee is subject to a quarantine or isolation order, they've been advised by a healthcare provider to quarantine, they're experiencing symptoms and getting they have a medical diagnosis that they have symptoms of COVID, they're caring for an individual who has symptoms or has been quarantined, and or they have other similar conditions specified by the CDC that would require them to be out of work. So they're going to have 80 hours of pay available to them. Again, the maximums for those are a little bit different depending on the reason. And those are the two different types of leaves available. There is a tax credit available for employers that do provide pay to employees for these reasons. So employers are going to be able to get some relief for the pay that they have to be in compliance with under the paid leave and the family leave. So there is some relief for employers in the form of a tax credit. Okay, let's go through a couple more questions.
Rhonda, what if we went to, this was submitted, I think while you were speaking, and it reads, I want to take care of my employees. As a small business, I don't know if or how long we can pay them if we are shut down. What kinds of relief are available to small businesses, and is there some reimbursement we can count on?
Okay.
I suspect most of you are up early like I was this morning, checking the news. At about 2 a.m. this morning, it was announced that the Senate has agreed on what appears to be about a $2 trillion coronavirus aid deal. That's $T trillion, but the details have not really come out. What we have heard, and I suspect you have done the same, is that there will be direct aid to individuals, direct aid to employers, and there's an attempt to put particular emphasis on small business. But unfortunately, at this point, we don't know details. But for that person who submitted the question, we'll be monitoring that very, very closely, because that is obviously on the minds of a number of you. May I suggest something? Let's try something, because we want to keep these questions coming in. And while they are, let me ask if you could, let's use the Q&A pane to get some answers. We've got a number of you who have indicated you've got folks who are working remotely from home. For some of you, these are folks who have never done that before. Here's my question. We know that presents challenges. You don't have the face-to-face supervision that you once had, and that has created kind of a strain. What do you do when you can't see your boss? For some, they like that, but from others, they found that that boss was a resource. So that being said, help us understand. We know that one of the challenges of remote work is you don't have face-to-face supervision. that you've lost access to information, particularly information that you could just lean over and get from a coworker easily. Now that people are working from home, they may or may not be on a regular schedule. And what we're also finding is because so many of the schools are closed and daycares are closed, our employees are having to work and take care of their kids simultaneously. And some of our employees are taking care of not only their kids, but they've got their parents to worry about. What other examples are you experiencing regarding challenges of remote work? Type those in and let's hear from you.
And Mike, while we're waiting on that, and this is just an example of how quickly things are changing and how information is coming in bits and pieces, just got a news flash on the effective date that we were just talking about. So real quickly, guidance makes clear that EPSLA and FMLA Plus are effective beginning on April 1st. There is no retroactive leave time granted. And if you choose to pay people, you can choose to pay people and use that paid time prior to April 1st. But if you do, it's not going to be eligible for the business tax credit. So if you want to, as a small company, be eligible for that tax credit and some reimbursement, then paid time after April 1st is what's going to be eligible.
Good. Thank you. What other challenges are you experiencing on this call from your employees, from your managers with this new situation where people are having to work from home in most cases? Let us hear from you on those. Rhonda, to the point you just made, by the way, if you didn't know, Rhonda and I are not together, so we can't look at each other, but what Rhonda just mentioned, everything that we're talking about, it's changing in real time. And so hopefully we're giving you time information here. Here's a question that came in. Let me see if I can read that. I'll attribute this. I'm going to read it verbatim. For those who are tools and project and workflow management savvy, there are two tools that can be very helpful: Microsoft Teams and Trello for workflow. Andrew writes, these tools allow collaboration, real-time and interactive, and it's also embedded into Zoom video and audio. And you can share that, I'm reading, with workflow management with team updates. Many of these provide free subscriptions for basic use. So Andrew, thank you for your suggestion. I don't know about y'all, but I've been introduced to things I didn't really know existed. And to the point that Andrew just made, a number of these tools are offering free versions, or if there were limits placed on it in the past, they're relaxing those limits because of the circumstance that we are dealing with. So Andrew mentioned Microsoft Teams as a good collaborative tool, Trello, both of those help with workflow. We're all getting experience with Zoom. On a personal front, we're part of a small group with our church that meets on Sunday evenings. This Sunday evening, that small group participated via Zoom, and it was uncanny. The oldest participant on that Zoom meeting was 85. No, she just turned 86. She had never done something like that. Matter of fact, most of the people on that had never used it before. So that gives you an idea of how user-friendly things like Zoom can be. And I hope you have similar experiences. We try new things. I think I mentioned a moment ago, Slack as a tool that can be very helpful for collaboration. So keep your comments coming, keep your questions coming.
Mike, I have another one that was submitted prior.
Rhonda, can you speak up? We can't hear you.
Oh, sure. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, please. Thank you.
All right. Sorry about that. I was turned to the side. So the question is, if we have an employee who's been diagnosed with coronavirus, should we disclose it to other employees? What about if they have symptoms, but they're not diagnosed? So first of all, you can definitely let employees know that there has been potential exposure, but for privacy and HIPAA reasons, you cannot reveal the employee's name. So you do have an obligation to keep your employees safe and to keep them informed and make sure that they know the situation, but you also have an obligation to a potential employee that may have the virus to not reveal their personal information. And another question related to that was if the employee is at high risk and just being cautious, wanting to take time off, are they going to qualify under the paid leave or the family leave? And just being high risk does not qualify you to be off and get the paid leave unless the person's healthcare provider has said that they need to be off of work because they are high risk. So with the expanded FMLA, for those of you that are familiar with the regular FMLA, you're still going to need the documentation. There hasn't been any new paperwork submitted yet, but we definitely would act with the doctor's note starting out. And then in the absence of any new FMLA paperwork, to have them complete the standard FMLA paperwork. So we still need the documentation. We still need physician's information, you know, not just an employee's statement that I'm high risk, so I'm taking my 2 weeks of paid leave. You still definitely need to follow your normal leave processes.
Thank you. Again, keep those questions coming in. We'd like to try to answer as many as we can while we're on this webinar. One of the questions that came in before we went on the webinar is, I've got managers out there who we're expecting to manage in this new reality. How can they best support these employees who are working remotely now? I thought it was a really good question, and I'd like to hear from you if you've got some additional ideas. One of the things we have found is the experts say, we hate to admit it, but we like and need structure as humans. And if managers can apply some degree of a structured daily check-in, and that is, if those employees hear from their manager on a regular and predictable basis, that goes a long way to kind of restoring that sense of, quote, normalcy. So what we're encouraging is, it could very well be one-on-one check-ins. It could very well be the whole team checks in. But what we are seeing is those check-ins are very, very important. I also might just point out that one of the things that kind of misses on these kinds of things is that if you are conducting a Zoom meeting with a team and they're trying to juggle family and all the other things that go along with it, it may be most appropriate to start these Zoom meetings, not so much dealing with the business at hand, but just acknowledge this, what we're dealing with, and show that you understand the challenges they have, demonstrate that sense of empathy. And if you just started any of these meetings with kind of a check-in, here's what's happening. For folks who are used to going to the office or going to the plant, we no longer have those water cooler chats. We need to figure out ways to enable that. We know that our employees are talking to each other via text, via email, via FaceTime, but why not just introduce that into your business check-ins, particularly when you're having those team meetings? Again, if you got more suggestions, add to those. I'm also mindful of, how can our managers best support those remote employees? What you obviously have to do here is, the rules have changed. So you kind of have to establish, what are the new rules of engagement? What should be the frequency in which things are expected? How should those things be submitted? What should the timing be? You basically have to kind of reinvent how that would do, and you're having to do that for most of you kind of on the fly. So we're acknowledging that. So other ideas that y'all would have.
Mike, I see a couple more questions have come in. Do you
Good.
have any tips for communicating this information to employees? There's a lot of confusion around how to take sick leave, what will be paid and what won't. Would you do a company newsletter or hold a meeting? And then it's changing regularly. Won't that be frustrating? So I would say it is extremely important to keep employees up to date on what you know. And I think just as we said at the beginning of this call, make sure they know that you're sharing with them what you have as you get it. And it is changing daily. So trying to keep them informed just as quickly as you can and as often as you can is going to ease their anxieties a little bit because, you know, again, remember, just like all of you, most likely your employees have a lot going on, not just the issue of what's happening with my job. You know, is our company going to be open? Am I going to have a job? Am I going to get paid? They may also have children at home. They don't know when they're going back to school. They may have childcare issues they're dealing with. If people are working from home, that's complicated and confusing and can cause some anxiety as well, aside from just worrying about their own health issues and health issues of their family. So your employees have a lot going on, and the more you can communicate to them, the more at ease they may feel. And you definitely want to be proactive in sharing with them what resources are available. And I would be glad to put together a summary and send it out if that would be helpful on the paid sick leave and on the expanded family leave with what we know today. So we can follow up and get that out in the next day or two if that's helpful for you to share with your employees. But I would definitely be proactive in sharing with them any resources that are going to be available to them for pay, for leave, unemployment, if there's, you know, a cutback or layoff situation, any type of emotional type problems employees may be having if you have an EAP or United Way or other community resources that can be helpful to them and their families. Make sure you're sharing all of that because that's going to demonstrate to them how much you do care about them as employees, because everybody is just dealing with a lot of stress and anxiety right now. So we'll work on getting a summary out that could be helpful to you. And then, you know, certainly if you have more detailed questions, we can try to help with that individually.
There's a few more questions that are coming in. While those are coming in, it was pointed out to me just a moment ago, something I just forgot to mention, and that is particularly for folks who are working on teams. If you have information that needs to be shared in real time, but that information is changing regularly, one thing you might give consideration for those who use like Google or Google Docs, if you have a shared document, a Google Doc, it means that whenever they go to that doc, whatever the most current information is kind of what it is they can kind of refer to. So add that to your list. If you're not familiar with Google Docs or its equivalent where you can share documents, it may very well be, Rhonda, that what we put together would be in some type of form that we can, when they go to it, it's updated in real time.
Good idea.
Kenny had a question. Do you want to answer Kenny's?
Sure. Can an employee, after April 2nd, can an employee who's caring for a child due to school daycare closing receive the 2/3 pay under the emergency paid sick leave for 10 days and then be granted expanded FMLA and be paid 2/3 after 10 days of unpaid, be paid 2/3 after 10 days of unpaid for up to 10 weeks? So yes, the first 10 days, if an employee is going to be out to care for their child because their child is out of school or out of daycare due to it being closed, they can use that paid sick time for the first 10 days if they choose to. You can't require them to. So technically on the expanded family leave, the first 10 days is unpaid. If the employee chooses to use paid time for that, whether it's the emergency pay or it's vacation pay or other paid time that they have, they can choose to use that. And then after the first 10 days, yes, their expanded family leave, if it's, you know, again, for the qualifying reason, would be at 2/3 of their pay with a maximum of $200 a day or $10,000 for the entire 10-week period. So they can use that paid sick leave during that first 10 days if they choose to.
You know, when we started the call, we shared that we work with business owners and one ways we help business owners is for them to kind of plan the future. It's hard to know exactly what's going to happen short term, much less long term. But one of our participants kind of pointed out that right now, all of us are focused on the immediate. We're trying to figure out how to survive today. And if what we read is correct, the number of diagnosed cases is going to do nothing but go up in the short term. That's going to raise anxiety levels. And for the here and now, we're all focused on just getting through today, getting through this week. We're not thinking long term. But what I would point out to you, it is not too early for us on this call to begin thinking, what will the new norm look like, and how might we as leaders begin positioning ourselves when we do turn the corner for what would be an upturn? What are we going to have to do as we restart the company? I know we're just starting this, but it's not too soon to begin thinking, what might that look like? If we do heed the advice and we continue to kind of shelter in place and reduce the number of public contacts, we hopefully will stem that tide and we will begin seeing things pick back up. But what I would say to you is, as you're advising your organization's leadership, or if you're on the call and you are in the leadership, it's not too early to begin thinking beyond this immediate. And it would be nice when these calls, assuming that you all would like to continue, when these calls are not necessarily focused on the crisis at hand, but we can begin shifting that emphasis on how do we rebound as quickly as possible. The economists that I read, maybe I'm choosing to read certain economists over others, is that it dropped fast, and therefore that is the economy took a sudden hit. But if that is the case, then the expectation is that it could rebound quickly. And if that happens, that presents a whole new set of challenges. Quite frankly, I'm looking forward to those challenges versus what we're dealing with now. Rhonda, have you seen any more questions come in or anything else you would like to?
Actually, there's a couple more questions. There are a couple more questions. Some of our employees are working remotely right now, but others are still in the office. Our managers are struggling to keep up with everyone. Are you aware of any training or consulting programs that are offered online to help them adapt to these new situations? That's a great question. And I know as a manager, it's extremely difficult to keep up with your work, deal with what employees are experiencing, again, figure out who's here, who isn't, what they're doing, and also worry about your business, because people's businesses are really being impacted by all of this financially, I know. Offhand, I don't have anything specific as far as training. Certainly, that's something that Mike and I are available to do. And there probably are some online courses which we can research and get some information out to you that would be helpful as well. So we'll follow up and provide some resources to you that can help with that. I would say a couple other things just in terms of keeping people informed. We talked about yesterday, I think. There's a lot of methods that you can communicate with employees. I think some of the difficulty is once people are out of work, if you don't have their personal contact information, it may be difficult to reach them. Or I know in my experience, many times you have contact information, but it's outdated. So this is a really good exercise to make sure, if you don't do it on a regular basis, to get employees' personal contact information updated quarterly or every 6 months or at some intervals, so that when something like this happens, you do have updated information for people. Something else I think that's really helpful to communicate is send a letter home. And that way you're involving families too and helping them to hopefully feel more comfortable with what's going on at their family member's workplace. But when you send letters home, not only is the employee getting it, but the family members are getting the information, so that hopefully they'll see how much you as an employer care about what's going on with their family member and their family. So I would encourage that. But we'll look for some resources to help your managers struggling with the communication. So again, a number of different ways you can communicate with people, and I wouldn't rely on just one. So, Andrew had mentioned some video conferencing. Group text is another great way. If you haven't used that before, there's a, oh, God, I can't think of the website now, but I will before we get off the call. You can set up a group text, and it's free as well. Again, that's going to rely on you having accurate phone numbers for people, but the school systems do it. You can set up your employees on a group text system and send out messages so they all get them on their phones. And that's a great avenue to help communicate with people.
Rhonda, you made a great suggestion, and it sounds almost kind of antiquated to mail a letter to the employee's home. But when an employee gets that letter and shares that letter with his or her family, the message to that family is that the company I work for cares about me. And you cannot underemphasize that right now. In the same way, the folks on this call, you're leaders. And as leaders, the employees that you lead are looking to you for kind of a sense of how are we doing? If they sense that you are calm, that you're being responsive, that you are there for them, they grow in their confidence that you, their leader, have their back, that you'll be there for them. And when we are all, in which we are now, when we're all in crisis, any reassurances that we can convey, particularly as leaders, and oftentimes in companies, the companies rely on HR to be that voice, to signal as much as you possibly can what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it, to convey to them, to the best of our ability, we're going to get through this together.
And Mike, I just looked up, I just couldn't remember, but the program that you can use to send out group text is called EZ Texting. So you can just go on their website and sign up, and it's free. And again, you do have to have phone numbers, but it's a great way to send out information. And I think Mike and I have both mentioned multiple times, communicating is so crucial at this point with people. So don't shut yourself in your office and try to hide. You've got to be out there communicating with people and trying to ease some of their anxieties. And again, it will definitely benefit you in the long run as an employer and as a manager. It's a good time to help develop some personal relationships with employees that can go a long way in how they feel about you as an employer. Let's see, if our government issues a mandated lockdown and non-essential business are forced to close indefinitely, would that qualify employees for payment under the required 80-hour paid sick leave? And or is anyone aware of how long it's currently taking for unemployment benefits to commence if one is laid off due to mandatory shutdown? So if a business shuts down, that is not going to fall under one of the reasons for paid sick leave. The paid sick leave is related to the employee's condition. It would allow employees to collect unemployment. So if it's a shutdown, they would be eligible for unemployment unless, again, their personal situation is that they are home due to the virus or have symptoms or are caring for somebody who is. As far as unemployment, it is going to take a little while for that to kick in. And if you're doing a mass layoff or you have a large group of people that are going to be out of work or there is a shutdown, there is a way to do that, and that makes it a little bit easier and faster for the employees. And you can submit a spreadsheet to the state in order to start their unemployment benefits so they don't have to individually go online and file. So if it's a temporary layoff situation and you expect a callback date, the best way to do that is to submit everybody together on a spreadsheet, indicate the expected callback date. And again, if it is a temporary layoff, then employees are not going to be expected to do the job search requirement as they would if they're permanently laid off from somewhere and looking for a job. If it's unknown, if you don't know when the callback date is, it's advised to put in a date, maybe a few weeks beyond what you expect, because it's a whole lot easier if you have a date out in the future that covers the employees than if you say, we expect them to come back in 2 weeks, and then they don't, and you have to extend it. So the best way with a mass layoff is to do a spreadsheet. It is still probably going to take 2 to 3 weeks, again, depending on what state you're in, for unemployment benefits to start. Okay, a couple more questions. You want to just keep going through these, Mike, or did you have anything
Why
else?
don't we? Let me also point out we have participants who did not. They're not watching online. They're listening on the phone call. So for those who are listening, dialing in, here's what we're going to attempt to do. One of our participants asked, would we send the information about these HR guidelines, and can you also share a list of tools that you're recommending? Most definitely. Everybody on this call will get something that we'll compile that hopefully summarizes to the best of our ability the tools that we're recommending and how to find them, and some specific things that have come up on this call. I will point out to you that our initial intent was to make this a kind of an audio call, and we opted out this being our first webinar. But if there's interest going forward to have something like this, a kind of a forum by which we can come together on a regular basis, I can pretty much tell you we like the spontaneity of hearing voices, not just seeing what you type in. We think we hear a more complete question, and we can check that we answer those questions. So the format that we will follow probably in the future would be less like what we're doing here, and more like the chat that I mentioned to you before, more of a coffee chat where we just get on and share with each other.
Okay,
Do you
and
want to go ahead and answer some of those questions, sir?
Andrew's made a good suggestion too that we can definitely plan for. Maybe offer a quick tour in a future session on the collaboration and workflow tools that can help solve communication challenges. So that's a great suggestion, Andrew, and we can definitely put that together. I think that'll be helpful for people, because a lot of people are figuring this stuff out as they go along. Just as we said with Zoom, we've used Zoom, but we haven't necessarily used it in the fashion we're using it today. So we're learning as well as everybody else is, with a lot of tools that they may or may not have used before. It's a great suggestion, Andrew. If employees are working from home, are we required to reimburse them for internet usage? Can they use their personal computers and cell phones, or do we have to provide them? And that's really going to be a company by company decision to make. You certainly are not required to reimburse them for internet usage. Years ago when people had phone plans and internet plans that were depending on the amount of usage or minutes, there was a lot of reimbursement programs at that time with companies. But right now, I mean, most people have internet, most people have cell phones, unlimited data, whatever it might be. So I would say it's your choice whether or not you feel it's appropriate to reimburse them. If they are incurring additional costs as a result of being required to work from home, I would certainly look at that. But if they don't have any additional costs beyond what they normally pay, certainly you're not required to reimburse. As far as using their personal computers and cell phones, yes, they can do that. But some companies do have restrictions on allowing personal devices to link to their systems. So again, that's going to be based on your company's security requirements and restrictions, whether they can link their personal computers and cell phones to your systems to be able to do work remote. But you can certainly allow them to do that, ask them to do that, and I would just say consider reimbursement if they're incurring additional charges for working at home.
Rhonda, one of our participants pointed out that there really is value to learning on a regular basis to get updated emergency contact information. And this is a little bit tricky because of privacy rules, but Christina suggested that another tool that is available would be Google Forms. And that if you're collecting information, it may be a good way for you to quickly and easily collect the employee contact information. And that if you have that, it would be much easier to take that and you can import that into email software, or like what Rhonda mentioned, easy texting would be another tool. So we'll put those things on the list that we just described there. So thanks, Christina. Good suggestion.
Okay, I think we have a few more minutes if there's any other questions.
Let me take this opportunity on behalf of Rhonda and me to say thank you. You gave us time this morning, time that you probably did not have. We hope this has been of value to you. We also ask that if there were any glitches you experienced, we will do everything we can to work through those glitches. But what I would say to you is that this has been very comforting to know that we have folks who are sharing the same issues, and what can we do to kind of learn from each other. I will also say that we, at the very last minute, made some decisions to kind of keep this communication as clean as possible. You've only seen basically 2 slides here. I'm going to quickly roll through some slides, but I'd like to draw your attention to something that we would like just to make available to you. Rhonda and I have kind of discussed, let me go back to how I fix that, bear with me. Rhonda and I have discussed how can we be of most help, and I want to try to get this so this will display on full screen, but we would like to be available for you, and we know that a number of the questions you ask have been somewhat to hopefully as thorough as it possibly can, but we want to be available to you. And so anybody on this call, if you so choose, if you would like to spend some one-on-one time with one of us, let us know. We're going to send out a link to all participants. In that link will be an opportunity to just tell us when will be a good time. And what we're going to do is we don't think that a typical phone call is going to be enough. The kinds of questions you are asking are very detailed, and therefore we're offering 2 hours of consultation, no charge. That's kind of our way of trying to give back. I will say this, it's in writing here. This is not a sales pitch for our services. We want to be available. We want to help in any way we can. We know that what we're dealing with is unprecedented, and anything we can do to help you do so, we would be happy to do so. So if you would like to spend some time, give us a holler. We would be delighted to spend some one-on-one time with you. Just let us know you would like to do that. I'm trying to figure out how to make this so it appears on a full screen. Even if it doesn't, I hope you can kind of see what we have here. Are there any other closing questions or comments that you would like? And if so, note those.
There's a couple on here.
Okay.
Are you going to be doing another webinar soon? Certainly we will. I think Andrew's made one suggestion for a webinar to go through some tools. Again, I think there's going to continue to be updates on how to handle situations with employees. And so I believe there'll be more information that we can share. So it sounds like this has been useful for people. So we will start setting up additional webinars similar to this, but also to answer questions that you may have had that we didn't have definite answers for yet. And someone has asked, if I have more questions, can I contact you? Absolutely. Our email addresses are on here, and we'll be following up by sending out the recorded version of this webinar, as well as the slides and the link to sign up for the consulting. And then following that, we'll also work on the summary sheet of the expanded FMLA and sick leave, which I think people are most interested in, as well as some resources available to help you with some of the remote work and some of your employee challenges that your managers might be having. So absolutely get in touch with us if there's something else that we can help you with. We definitely want to try to answer what we can as it comes up, and we'll provide updates as often as we can as well.
All right, thank you, Rhonda. So in terms of what you could expect from us, Zoom gives us the capability. We've recorded this webinar. You will be provided a link to the webinar so you can go back and play back. We think that that playback will also display the questions, but what we'll also do in our recap is try to restate those questions. We'll put particular emphasis on a number of tools that have been mentioned by us and by you, the participants. We'll also include this PowerPoint that you did not see, but it has some information you may find helpful. And again, if we can be any help, don't hesitate, reach out. So we're quickly coming up on the top of the hour. On behalf of Rhonda and me, thank you so much for your availability this morning and your willingness to participate. And I wish you all the best. Go in peace. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone. Have a good day.